Hello everybody, I'm LinguaPhiliax, and today I'm going to be continuing my explanation of AusWrit, a constructed script I made to help me learn Auslan. I'd highly recommend checking out my previous video on poses first before you watch this, as some stuff probably won't make no sense otherwise. But if you've already seen that one, don't forget to give this one a like and share it online, as well as subscribe and ring that notification bell. And also, it really helps me if you can leave a comment down below so I can see if any of this stuff is making sense to you. Communication is important, you know, and it gives me a clearer understanding of how I should present myself in each video. But anyway, I'm just gonna hop straight into it and talk about the specifics and how they interact with poses. While poses tell the reader the general positions and shapes of the arms and hands, specifics, as the name implies, highlight certain specific positions and shapes of different body parts that are necessary to producing the sign. There are three commonly used specifics in AusWrit: arm specifics, hand specifics, and finger specifics, or diacritics, and they each have their own unique and intricate rules. Arm specifics are used whenever the arms of a pose are either crossed or at a definitive diagonal angle, and they are always written immediately after the pose before any other symbols. There are arm specifics that specify up and down, diagonal, and crossed arms as seen from a front-facing angle, and that concludes the list of specifics I have actually needed to use. These are all the other theoretical specifics I have in mind, however I'm not sure if any of them are actually necessary, but I'm still going to put them in this video anyway. Regardless, the stroke orders of arm specifics ideally start with the body shape first, front-facing or side-facing as shown, and then the two lines specifying the arm positions, with the dominant written first and the supporting second. And I actually think that's all the relevant information you need to know about arm specifics. Yeah, they're pretty straightforward. Honestly, they're not that frequently used either, since most of the information about arm positions would be outlined by the pose. Hand specifics, on the other hand... get it? On the other hand, I'm sorry. The hand specifics are a lot more commonly used. They are used to specify to the reader a more detailed hand shape than the one outlined in the pose, and they are usually written after the poses and arm specifics, with the dominant hand first and the supporting second. I'll explain what I mean by usually when I get to talking about the actions, but the only time a hand specific does not need to be written is when the assumed hand shapes of the pose don't need no specification. In other words, if the fists, flats, and stars each look like this, and nothing else about the hands or fingers matters, then and only then is a hand specific not necessary, but this is a very rare occurrence. There are four major identifiable components to hand specifics: the wrist line, the palm, the thumb, and the fingers, and they are generally written in that order. The wrist is only written for the dominant hand and is omitted for the supporting hand, but the palm is always written as an arching bridge wide enough to fit 3 strokes underneath it. The thumb on the hand specific can either be outside pointing away from the arch, inside crossing over the arch, or inside pointing upwards, and the fingers can either be above the arch pointing upwards or as separate strokes written inside the arch. Only a maximum of 3 finger strokes are allowed inside the arch, however, and they are only ever written if they are not covered by the thumb. For example, for both these hands, the thumb is crossing over and the 2 middle fingers are down, but because these ones are covered by the thumb, they are not written in the specific. The stroke order of hand specifics starts off with the wrist line, if applicable, then the palm and the thumb are written in one long stroke, with the main arch following the text direction, and then all the down fingers are written, and then all the up fingers, each also according to text direction. With all of these parts, it is possible to outline all the relevant fingers on the specific hand shapes required for producing the sign, but this still doesn't tell you necessarily anything about the shape of the fingers themselves. And with that in mind, I can easily segue onto the finger specifics and how they work. Finger specifics, or diacritics, unlike the arm and hand specifics, do not get their own standalone symbols. Instead, they are written as diacritical marks above the hand specific, and the ones I'll be talking about in this video can generally be sorted into these vague categories. Bending diacritics specify that the relevant fingers are bent or curled in some way. This one specifies that the fingers are bent into a curving shape, just like in the word for drink. This one specifies that the relevant fingers are curled so that the knuckles form a square, just like in the word for will or shall, and this one specifies that the fingers are bent at a flat right angle, just like in the word for today. Splitting diacritics specify whether the fingers are together or apart in a more detailed way than the hand shapes in the pose. This one specifies that 2 fingers are definitively split apart from each other, just like in the word for talk, and I also made a converse of this diacritic for specifying that 2 fingers are together, but I haven't actually found no words where this is necessary. I still thought it was worth mentioning here anyway. And finally, ring diacritics specify that the thumb and fingers have been brought together to make a ring shape. This one specifies that the fingers make a definitive circle shape, just like in the word for 0, and this one specifies that the fingers are pulled to a single point, just like in the word for right. There is also a diacritic that isn't technically a finger specific, but I'm still going to mention it here, which specifies that the dominant hand and the supporting hand are exactly symmetrical to each other. Notice how the shape of the diacritic is meant to look like the thumb and the arch of a supporting hand specific. There are a lot of signs in Auslan where the hands are symmetrical to one another, including, for example, the word for Australia. The assumption is that if the hands are symmetrical, they would both perform the same action, but obviously I'll get into more detail about that in the next video. Also, if you'll remember last time where I briefly mentioned facial expressions, it wasn't until making this video that it occurred to me facial expressions would technically be specifics as well. It's just that similar to finger specifics, facial expressions would be written above a pose symbol instead of being their own standalone symbol. Again, I haven't quite fleshed out the facial expressions and I won't be talking about them in detail in this series, so I think that's enough information you need to know about the specifics and how they work. In the next video I'll be going over the locations and actions as well as how they connect to poses and specifics, but until that video comes out, don't forget to like this video, share it online, subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell, and also remember to leave your comments down below as well. Thank you all for listening, and we'll speak again next time.